The little cafe on the corner of Maple and Fifth was alive with its usual rhythm. The hiss of the espresso machine blended with the low hum of chatter, and the scent of roasted beans clung to the air like a comforting blanket. It was the kind of place where locals came to catch their breath. Students with laptops, parents with strollers, professionals with briefcases. At a table near the window sat Danielle Brooks, a poised black woman in her mid-30s. She wore a crisp blazer, her hair pulled back neatly, and her presence carried quiet authority. On the surface, she looked like any other customer enjoying her morning coffee. But beneath the calm exterior, Danielle's sharp eyes flicked across the cafe from time to time, noting entrances, exits, and faces. She wasn't here just for caffeine. She was waiting. The bell above the door jingled sharply as it opened. In walked Officer Kurt Donnelly, a uniformed cop with a swagger that filled the small cafe. His boots struck the tile with a heavy rhythm, his sunglasses still perched arrogantly on his face despite the indoor lighting. He ordered loudly at the counter, cracking jokes that made the barista laugh nervously, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Kurt's gaze soon swept across the room and landed on Danielle. His brow furrowed, suspicion sharpening his expression. To him, she didn't fit. She wasn't laughing like the others, wasn't typing furiously at a laptop or juggling a toddler. She was calm, observant, and to Kurt's mind, that made her a problem. He strode over, coffee in hand, and loomed beside her table. "Ma'am," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "I've had reports about someone causing unease in this cafe. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Danielle raised her eyes slowly from her cup, her expression unreadable. "I'm just drinking my coffee," she replied evenly. Kurt smirked, pulling out the chair opposite her without invitation. "Funny thing is, you don't look like you belong here. Folks are saying you're making them uncomfortable. Staring too much, maybe waiting for trouble." The room grew quieter. Conversations dimmed as customers pretended to focus on their phones or pastries, though their ears were tuned sharply to the tension. Danielle felt the weight of their eyes but remained steady. She leaned back slightly, her calmness only fueling Kurt's irritation. "Officer," she said, her tone cool but firm, "you're mistaken. I'm not here to cause trouble. Perhaps you should check your sources." Kurt chuckled humorlessly, tapping a finger on the table. "See, that's the thing. I don't need sources. I trust my instincts. And my instincts tell me you're up to something." Danielle took another slow sip of her coffee, refusing to be rattled. Inside, she knew the irony was brewing thicker than the espresso in his cup. He had no idea who she was, no idea why she was really here. And soon enough, his arrogance would lead him straight into a revelation he'd never forget. Kurt leaned back in his chair as if he owned the cafe, his badge glinting under the warm light. He didn't lower his voice. Instead, he made sure everyone nearby could hear his words. It wasn't just about Danielle anymore. It was about performance, about proving his authority in front of a silent audience. "So," he drawled, sipping from his cup without breaking eye contact, "are you going to tell me why you're sitting here like you're casing the place? People don't just sit around watching everyone unless they're up to no good." Danielle's gaze remained steady, but her patience was being tested. "I'm not watching anyone. I'm minding my own business, officer. Maybe you should try the same." The response earned a few muffled chuckles from nearby tables, though quickly stifled when Kurt turned his head in their direction. His jaw tightened, and his eyes snapped back to her. "Careful, lady. Sarcasm doesn't look good when you're being questioned." Danielle set her coffee down, the porcelain cup clicking softly against the saucer. Her movements were calm, deliberate, controlled. "Questioned? I didn't realize sitting quietly at a cafe was a crime. Perhaps you should enlighten me on which law I'm breaking." That statement, delivered with a touch of steel, unsettled Kurt. But instead of backing down, he leaned in closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound menacing. "Don't play smart. I can have you out of here in handcuffs if I decide you're disturbing the peace. Trust me, nobody's going to question me when I say you were causing trouble." The cafe had fallen nearly silent now. The barista froze mid-pour, Customers stopped typing on their laptops, and all eyes lingered on the confrontation playing out in the corner. A man near the counter pulled out his phone discreetly, tilting it to record. Danielle's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. She recognized the pattern, arrogance weaponized into intimidation. But while Kurt thought he was tightening a noose, Danielle knew he was only weaving a trap for himself. "Tell me something," she said softly, tilting her head. "Do you always harass women who sit alone with a cup of coffee? Or is it only women who look like me?" The words cut through the air with precision. A few customers gasped quietly, exchanging looks. Kurt's face flushed, a mix of anger and embarrassment. "Watch it," he growled, his fist clenching on the table. "You're dangerously close to resisting an officer." Danielle sat back, crossing one leg over the other, exuding a calmness that contrasted starkly with his bluster. "No, officer. I'm not resisting anything. I'm simply pointing out what's obvious to everyone watching. You've decided I'm guilty of something without a shred of evidence." Kurt's jaw worked furiously. His pride stung under the scrutiny of both Danielle and the witnesses. He had expected fear, maybe compliance, not measured defiance. And certainly not in front of an audience. But what Kurt didn't know was that this audience, along with the recordings now quietly capturing his behavior, would soon witness a revelation that would flip his entire world upside down. The cafe was still, every pair of eyes pinned to the corner table where Officer Kurt loomed over Danielle. His smug confidence was cracking, though he tried to mask it with bluster. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he sneered. "But sitting here, staring at people, refusing to cooperate, that's suspicious. And I could make life very difficult for you." Danielle's smile didn't falter. In fact, it grew ever so slightly, as though she had been waiting for this exact moment. She leaned forward, her voice calm but laced with undeniable authority. "Officer Donnelly, the only person making this situation difficult is you. And since you seem so concerned about why I'm here, let me enlighten you." Her hands slipped once more into her blazer, but this time there was no hesitation, no caution. She withdrew a sleek black leather case and set it on the table with a deliberate thud. When she flipped it open, the golden badge inside gleamed beneath the cafe lights. Gasps rippled through the room. "My name is Danielle Brooks," she announced, her tone crisp and commanding. "Federal investigator. I'm here on official business, and you've just interfered with an active operation." The color drained from Kurt's face. His smirk dissolved into stunned silence as his eyes flicked from the badge to Danielle's steady gaze. Around the cafe, patrons leaned forward, whispering in disbelief. Phones recording the incident zoomed in on the emblem of authority that now mocked every arrogant word Kurt had spoken. Danielle continued, her voice carrying the sharp edge of a blade. "For the past 20 minutes, you've harassed me without cause. You accused me of being a threat, threatened me with arrest, and made a spectacle of your bias in front of witnesses. And the most amusing part? You have no idea who my investigation concerns." Kurt swallowed hard, his bravado slipping away like sand through fingers. What investigation?" he stammered. Danielle's eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "Your commanding officer, the man you call your boss. He's the reason I'm here. And in about 5 minutes, this cafe will be the site of his arrest." The cafe erupted into murmurs, disbelief and shock buzzing like electricity through the air. The barista covered her mouth with both hands, while the man recording let out an audible, "Oh my God!" Kurt sat frozen, his authority shattered, his arrogance reduced to ash. Danielle leaned in closer, her words dropping like hammers. "You wanted to play power games. But here's the truth. I hold more power in this one badge than you will ever have hiding behind your uniform. And today, the system you thought protected you will expose itself, starting with your boss." For the first time since stepping into the cafe, Kurt Donnelly had no comeback. The ground beneath him had crumbled, and all he could do was sit in stunned silence as the reality of Danielle's words settled like a storm over the cafe. The tension in the cafe had reached a boiling point. All eyes were locked on Danielle, her badge gleaming like a beacon of authority. Officer Kurt sat frozen, his earlier bravado evaporating under the weight of what had just been revealed. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, desperate to regain footing but too shaken to speak. Danielle, calm as ever, checked her watch. "Right about now," she said smoothly. "Your boss should be arriving." As if on cue, the bell above the café door jingled again. In walked Captain Raymond Cole, Kurt's commanding officer. A man with graying hair and a presence that once commanded respect, though today his expression was weary and distracted. He didn't notice the stares, didn't sense the tension. He simply walked toward the counter, his usual coffee order already forming on his lips. But before he could speak, Danielle stood. Her chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp in the silent café. She moved with precision, producing a slim folder of documents from her bag and handing them to the two agents who had quietly entered behind Captain Cole. "Captain Raymond Cole," Danielle's voice rang out clearly, steady and professional. "You are under federal investigation for corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Effective immediately, you are under arrest." The café erupted in gasps. Phones that had been filming Kurt now swiveled to capture the unfolding spectacle. The two agents flanked Cole, placing him in cuffs as stunned patrons looked on. The captain sputtered in disbelief. "This is a mistake. There has to be some misunderstanding." But Danielle remained unwavering. "The only misunderstanding," she said, eyes flicking briefly toward Kurt, "is that power allows men like you to escape accountability. That ends today." Kurt's jaw dropped, his entire world crumbling before him. His hero, his superior, the man he'd looked up to and defended, was being marched out of the café in chains. Worse yet, his own reckless arrogance had nearly compromised the operation that brought him down. The café, once hushed with tension, now buzzed with vindication. Customers whispered to one another, their voices brimming with disbelief and admiration. "She caught his boss," one patron muttered. "Unbelievable," another whispered. "That cop had no idea who he was messing with." Danielle gathered her things calmly, slipping her badge case back into her blazer pocket. She turned to Kurt one last time, her gaze steady and unflinching. "Officer Donnelly," she said firmly, "consider this a lesson. You wield authority, but authority without respect, without discipline, is nothing but a hollow threat. Remember this moment, because the world just watched you try to humiliate me. And instead, you humiliated yourself." With that, she walked past him, her heels clicking against the tile, each step echoing with finality. The café door swung shut behind her as the crowd murmured in awe. Kurt remained seated, his coffee untouched, his uniform suddenly feeling far heavier than it had that morning. The badge on his chest, once a symbol of power, now burned like a brand of shame. And in the end, the lesson was undeniable. True authority is not found in intimidation, but in justice. And justice had just been served.